Good morning. Today will be watching this video on insurance because you are not too far away from driving. At the age of 15, you can be behind the wheel if you are in a accredited driving school. So we're going to take a look at insurance and driver responsibility. So if we take a look at this, you can see that insurance covers the risk anytime you have a potential for loss. If you're driving a car and you run into a fence, you have to pay for the damage to that property. You might lose money because you damaged the car. Maybe you dent a fender and you have to have it repaired. Anytime you do something where there's a risk, you can usually get insurance. So there's different types of insurance, and we're going to look at those in a minute. But insurance covers the risk of loss. If I live in a neighborhood and I see my neighbor has his children outside and they're playing with fire, I cannot insure their house thinking they're going to burn it down, because if their house would happen to burn down, I wouldn't have lost any money. I don't have any money invested in that house. If that house burns down, I have no loss. So insurance covers risk. Premium is how much you pay for that coverage. So when you first start driving as a young driver, a young lady will cost probably about $125 to $150 a month, where a young man will cost slightly more. Insurable interest. Remember the example I gave you about the house in the neighborhood? Insurable interest says you would suffer a loss if something happened. If my neighbor's house burns down, I don't have any loss that's going to happen. I don't have insurable interest. The same thing goes with life insurance. Life insurance pays when somebody dies and the money goes to the family or the beneficiary. Now, I cannot go around insuring people because I think they look like they're having health issues. I can only insure someone who would cause me to have a loss if they were to pass away. In Indiana, you have to insure, you have to give your beneficiary money to your spouse. So in Indiana, my husband would get my money, and if he would pass, I would get his money. The only way you can change that is if the person who is supposed to get the money puts it in writing that they don't want the money. So insurable interest is you're going to have a loss if something does happen. We're going to look at state-by-state minimum car insurance requirements today. There's an excellent article. I'm going to show you the site and I'll give you the website to use. But you are going to have some questions to answer. So if you take a look at the types of policies, the very first one that I give you in this video is automobile insurance. If you see the bulleted list, I see 7 different types of insurance within one policy. Liability always covers the person you hit when it's your fault. It also covers the property you damage when it's your fault, but it has to belong to the other person. So for instance, you're driving along and you're texting, which is a bad idea, but you run off the road and you hit a fence. Liability insurance covers the fence you hit, and if somebody was out in the yard, it would cover them. But liability covers the person that you damage or their property you damage. That's what liability means. So your car, if it has damages and all you have is liability, you would not have any repairs done to your car. You would have to pay for all of those. So what we're going to look at today is the minimum requirements. And in Indiana, the minimum requirement is only liability. So when you watch a commercial for the General and he has his little jingle, he has the cheapest insurance because he's giving you minimum insurance. So right here, there's an article. It's called Minimum Car Insurance Requirements by State. and this is by NerdWallet. NerdWallet writes a lot of good financial articles, so we're going to pop into that article, and this is the article you're going to use for answering the questions that I give you. So if you take a look, it starts talking here about minimum car insurance requirements vary from state to state. They really do. And they've assembled the minimum requirements. So if we take a look, going down here, if we take a look at Alabama, this article has cut out, oh, right here, up here under show more, make sure you hit that, because at the top here it says what is liability car insurance and how much do you need. And so if you take a look at that little item, they talk about what liability insurance is. You're going to find some questions on the paper that's attached to this that relate to that section. So make sure you look at that. And here's a section, do you need liability car insurance? How much do you need? And now we're going to take a look by state. You can see it's all one article. Very, very good article. So if you look at Alabama, they have a $25,000 bodily injury liability per person. So if you're driving, let's say I'm driving and it's my fault and I hit somebody with several people in the car, my policy will, if I go with this minimum will only cover $25,000 per person. And the bad thing is it only goes to $50,000 for the entire accident. So if there are 4 people in that car and I cause $25,000 damage to each of them in medical bills, that's $100,000. This policy, the minimum requirement is only $50,000 per accident. Look at that second line. $50,000 of it would be my responsibility to pay because my insurance policy that I buy is only going to cover $50,000. If we take a look at the third line, it says $25,000 property damage liability per accident. So if I run into somebody's fence and in that fence happens to be 2 prize-winning beagles and I run over them, I would have to pay for the fence and the 2 prize-winning beagles and their vet bills. Hopefully it would be less than $25,000, or that would be my responsibility as well. If you take a look at Alaska, they recently have raised their amount, and you can see that they are approximately double what Alabama is, except for property damage. So as you can see, each state has the requirements here. A lot of them do the $25,000, $50,000, $25,000. Look at California. Only $15,000 per person in medical bills and $30,000 in medical bills for an entire car. If I go out there and I get in an accident, I only have to have insurance for $30,000 of medical bills. That is not enough. My mother-in-law recently fell and had to have surgery and a plate put into her wrist, and that was close to $100,000. $30,000 is simply an emergency room visit for 4 people because they do tests. It's very expensive. If you take a look, you see some of them start to add more coverage, like underinsured and uninsured. Let's get to Indiana here. Right here's Indiana. It is the same as Alabama, as you can see. Some of them have made it pretty complicated. If you look at Kansas, they talk about bodily injury. That's your car. Then you have property damage. That's the other person's property. Uninsured, underinsured. And you prove that you have this. If you don't want to take an insurance policy out, you have to have this much money in the bank that you hold specifically for this purpose. But most people take insurance out for these amounts, and that's how they get coverage. So let's say that when you leave high school and you want to move to Rhode Island here, for instance, you will have to make sure you meet these minimum requirements when you're driving a vehicle there, or the bills are rather hefty when you get pulled over or in an accident. Look at Washington, the state of Washington, only $10,000 in property damage. If you run into a telephone pole, you have to pay for that, plus all the work the workmen do to put it into the ground and get a new one going. So if you notice here at the bottom, it talks about what an umbrella insurance policy is. You're going to need that material. So kind of be familiar with this article, and you will be answering questions on this. So this is going to be a 2-day assignment. Have a good day.